Hello guys, Slimer here. Happy to be bringing you another Little War Game video. Today we're going to be checking out a match between myself in the bottom right and Dragon Archer Z in the top left. So this is a pretty interesting game that I thought we could learn a bit from and be entertained by. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to be going for Castle first, into some beast shenanigans. And Dragon Archer Z is doing his normal castle first into houses and racks units and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is I played a couple games on ladder today, and I ran into a couple newer players that were just doing builds that are frankly quite incorrect and really bad. And that's the easiest way to just lose a game, like before you've even started, basically, is by doing an incorrect build. And that can be frustrating for players because they kind of like can't get into the meat of the game. Like they can't, it's not even like macro or micro or whatever that's causing them to lose. It just comes down to their build order and their, building placement and decision stuff. So with that being said, I would say for any new player out there, one of the easiest builds to learn is just this castle first, which means you're basically going to queue up 2 workers as soon as the match starts, throw down a castle first as soon as you hit 350 gold. As soon as you have continuous production of workers, build a house, and then as soon as the house is completed, you can build a racks or a den, depending on whether you want to go into beast play or racks play. And this build is pretty safe. You might lose to a certain all-ins, but in general, this build is completely safe. And it gives you a really strong economic advantage into the mid game. If you prefer beast play, I think a 1 den is maybe slightly more solid. There's some nuances between it for den, but for racks, this is absolutely one of the best builds out there because a 1 racks expand actually is pretty bad, just from an economic standpoint. But so yeah, this build, it's really simple. There's no rocket science to it. There's only 4 buildings to put down. There's nothing complicated here. You just got to make sure you put them in the right order and are very sharp on your timings and producing workers. But if you do this kind of build, you're going to set yourself up for a strong mid game, and you won't find yourself falling behind simply because you did a poor strategy and built random towers or something. Don't do that, guys, by the way. Don't build random towers because they're bad. Alright, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what I'm doing on my side of the map. I've gone for a standard castle first, but the only thing that's not standard is I'm going for a really fast fortress. I'm cutting workers. You can see I'm only at something like 7 at my main base, so I'm cutting workers here to rush out a very quick double dragon lair. So the theory behind this build is I'm going to stay on 2 bases for quite a while here, and I'm only going to get dragon lairs out extremely fast to get dragons out to kill as many workers as possible. The problem with this build is I'm going to have a very late 3rd base, so you have to accept that straight off the bat that you have a late 3rd base. So the racks player has the opportunity to get a very quick, slight economic advantage with a 3rd base. But the idea behind the build is that your dragons are going to cause enough damage on the other side of the map to justify the slower 3rd base. And you're going to kind of see how I play that out in a couple minutes here. So I have my double lair up, and you can kind of see the amount of gold you have to put into this double lair is going to delay a lot of your tech. I get a safety tower because I have so few units that if he's going for a big, strong push out, I kind of need this tower to stay safe. Without this tower, I could lose just to a straight up push, although I do have double den, so I can pump out a couple wolves if I feel like I'm in danger. And here I'm a little concerned because I don't scout a 3rd base, and I feel like it's a little on the late side. But it's hard to tell because I think, the 3rd base should be coming right about now. So I was a little early on that scout, and I think I come back in a bit later with my wolves. You can see Dragon Archer Z is spotting for my 3rd base. This is another very smart play by the racks player. He's keeping an eye on the normal 3rd base so that he can kind of find out if I'm going for any kind of all-in or similar play to, like, say, this dragon play. And this soldier allows him to do that. If he didn't have this soldier out here, he'd have to be kind of going blind or something. And he's trying to get into my main base with this soldier. I'm not going to let him do that, obviously. And I pick that off. But he does kind of see I have a tower here. He sees I'm very defensive, and he sees that I have only 4 wolves as far as he can tell. So he can kind of feel safe. Like, he knows he's not going to lose anything. But he still doesn't know exactly what I'm up to. He can maybe guess that it's dragons or something, but he doesn't know for sure. And here I get my 3rd base. If you just look at the units here, I'm on 22 workers. Daz is already up to 26, and so he's going to have a very well saturated 3rd base as soon as it completes. So he's going to have a very nice economic advantage, at least for the moment. And he also has a pretty strong Rax move out. This is actually a pretty scary moment for me. If he commits with this Rax move out, I could be in a little bit of trouble. I would have to use the dragons defensively, and he only has 3 archers, so I would be able to clean this up. But that wouldn't be ideal because he would be able to get a nice economic position behind it. But he doesn't decide to commit, so that's kind of all for naught. And we can also see that, just really quickly, Daz is going for these mage guild, so that's an interesting tech choice, going for pretty early mages. Now you can start seeing the economic harassment of the dragons come into play here. Already picked off 1 worker, and we're delaying a ton of mining time at the main base, which is a pretty important thing to point out. And now I notice I have 4 dragons against 2 archers. Dragons generally, you never really want to fight straight up with archers if you don't have to. In this case, since there's only 2 archers, I wanted to try to put as much damage as possible. So I pick off 2 archers, then I realize there's a couple more coming up, and I pull back. Or I should be pulling back if I'm smart. Pick off another worker. So we've already picked off a couple workers, a couple archers. We're still a bit behind economically, but having these dragons, at least for this portion of the game, gives us a massive mobility and damage point at this moment, because it's going to be just really hard for him to keep control over his bases and keep mining regularly when I have this many dragons, putting damage down, delaying mining time on his worker lines. And you can already see I'm about caught up with workers. On the income tab, he's quite a high level ahead of us. He's at 55,000. I'm just getting up to 500. He's about 600 gold ahead of us. But we're way ahead in gold lost. We're about 600, 700 gold ahead in the gold lost tab. So you can see the amount of damage we're doing is kind of evening up the gold lost tab. And we're even starting to even up the income tab, because we're now getting close to fully saturated 3-base economy. Lose our first dragon there, but it's kind of worth it because we're picking off lots of workers and we're still doing massive delayed mining time. And at this point, I'm floating quite a bit of money because I'm not playing very well. Ideally, you'd want to spend that money much better. But I'm going to be throwing down some upgrades here, because when you have this much money, the fastest way to spend it is always throwing down upgrades and production structures. A lot of times you can maybe look up to your right and you see you have a ton of money and you're like, oh my gosh, you start panicking. And the best way to spend that is definitely to just throw down a couple upgrade facilities, because upgrades are always a good way to spend your money. And oftentimes that's like the problem with your build, is that you haven't got the upgrades rolling yet. You can also throw down a 4th base. It's also a pretty smart decision with your income. So we can see just we're still a bit behind in the gold mined by a couple hundred. But again, our dragons are giving us a lot of map control and just damage potential here. And we're kind of forcing him to stay very defensive, and also we forced him to build an advanced workshop and towers and stuff. This is a lot of tech that he really wouldn't otherwise want to have produced at this time in the game. So just looking at what we're doing at this point, we're going to add a 4th base in, we're going to add these upgrades in, we're going to kind of leverage this clean economic position we've got ourselves into. We should be up to, we're at 32 workers. A little bit of messed up saturation here, too many workers on my base there. We're going to get a nice snipe on this mage. I'll take that. Take that straight to the bank. We're also going to do some delay on this worker. Now, of course, it's really hard to do much damage when ballistas and towers are out, because ballistas can be repaired. I'm also going to lose a couple dragons here. But the thing about this stage of the game is it's pretty okay to start dropping dragons. because they kind of have limited effectiveness towards the mid game. I mean, they're still solid units, and I'm not like completely sold on exactly what the correct composition is. I'm not even sure if a couple dragons is a good idea, but I generally like to trade them out once you get past the stage where you can get significant damage done. So I'm just gonna poke and trade with my dragons, do damage where I can, and then eventually lose them and put all my supply into snakes and wolves. You can see I'm not replacing the dragons that I'm losing here. I'm just basically getting as much damage as I possibly can get out of them, and then I'm going to trade them out. And yeah, if we just take a quick look at the production tab, I've got quite a few dens. I've got up to 6 dens. Should be adding a handful more. As a beast player, you want to have a really nice den count as you get towards these later stages of the game, because your units are going to die quite swiftly, so you want to be able to replace them really fast, so that you can, like, you know, almost fight 2 waves against the Rax army. You want to be able to fight a fight in the middle of the map, lose your entire army, and then replace it by the time that army walks down to your base. Because the Rax armies are generally stronger than yours, but you have the ability to replace them extremely quickly and cheaply. And you have to remember that you can trade 2 units for every 1 unit he can build, because his units cost about roughly twice as much as yours. So now he's going for the fight. And this is just where having a nice upgrade advantage is going to make this fight go far easier for us. And that's just really leveraging that upgrade advantage we were able to get because we're like, even though he was mining a lot, he was having to constantly replace like workers and stuff, so that allows us to just get a lot of damage, get a lot of upgrades ahead of him. He's at +2 with only 1 upgrade on the way. And these 2 ballistaes are just basically dead supply. Nice fireball, almost catches all our snakes. I think we barely managed to dodge it. Now you see I'm pulling workers here. That's because it's always worth it in these kind of situations to get a really strong trade against the Rax player. So pulling workers is no big deal. They're very cheap to replace at this late stage of the game, and it's always worth it to try to take that really good fight. So I'd much rather swipe this army and lose a couple workers than have to deal with him, you know, continue to replace it. Also, as a beast player, always think about the fact that archers by themselves are fairly weak. They have very good damage, but they're not very tanky. So if he has just archers without his soldiers, your units can jump on top of him and really slaughter the archers pretty brutally. So as soon as I see that he doesn't have too many soldiers with his army, I'm ready to just jump on top of it with my wolf snake forces. And I think he kind of realizes that because he is adding a couple of soldiers on. I still think his soldier ratio is a little too low for this kind of engagement, and I think we're going to see me win pretty decisively once this engagement comes fully into fruition. Also, that upgrade advantage, I still have that one armor advantage on him. And while all this fight is going on, we've put some heavy pressure on his 4th base. This is another thing you really have to do as the beast player, is don't just fight the Rax in one situation. Try to fight the Rax in multiple areas. So always try to hit with the flank, because you have to leverage the speed of your snake wolf army compared to the speed of the Rax army. So even as he's trying to push here, I'm counterattacking on the upper side, and he's just not getting any mining done, whereas I have a ton of workers able to mine at my... I'm basically fully saturated at my 4th base. So I've got a really good income, whereas he is almost out at his 5th base. He's attempting to secure his 4th and 5th here, but neither of them are actually fully mining yet. And but you have to be careful as the beast player. You don't want to let the Rax player get this much money up for an extended period of time. You can also see I'm transitioning to mages. This is a pretty solid mid to late game transition for beast, because you'll start to find that you'll have more and more trouble dealing with the Rax armies as the beast player once they start getting towards later upgrades and later stage of the game. So to kind of combat that, it's a good idea to mix in a couple mages and get fireball, and that allows you to really put damage down on big archer fireballs like what Dragon Archer Z is macroing out right now. You can see I'm sending out these units to flank. That's pretty important. You always want to be able to... ooh, those fireballs get a little damage done, but not too much for the amount of mana he wasted there. Always try to get wolf flanks, especially in the back, because if you can catch wolves and get them on top of archers, that's a fantastic position for the beast player. And I get a juicy fireball right through the middle of his archer forces. A lot of our units do get chunked down though, so we have to fall back. And this is another important thing you have to do as beast, is you may lose a fight in your production, but don't panic. Keep your production up, because the longer this engagement goes, the more units I'm going to have streaming across the map, whereas he has only a handful of units to add to the production. And also you can pull workers and stuff. So just kind of rally like these dens up here, rally these dens down here, and then once your units are all ready, get the full surround on them. And you can always pull workers in that situation too. Although don't pull workers too much, and make sure you remember to replace them once you engage them. So Daz is trying to put on this really strong mid-game attack. He has only plus 3 attack, but he has plus 5 and plus 4 on the way. Whereas I am up to plus 5, plus 2, so I still have this really nice upgrade advantage, which is allowing me to trade pretty effectively. And again, you don't want to let the Rax player get up to such a really strong economy if you can help it. You can see here I'm hitting from the top, trying to get the full surround in his army, force his archers to kite. We experienced a bit of lag in the game. I don't think you see it on the replay. And now this upgrade advantage is just allowing me to really just smash through his forces and push him back. And once you get the Rax player off your back, you immediately need to now try to counterattack if you can. Because we're both on a very comfortable position, supply and money wise. I still have a plus 2 attack or plus 2 upgrade advantage. But as you get towards the later game, those like armor upgrades for beasts are kind of only minimally important. They're still important, but I usually place less emphasis on them myself. So really important to see, I'm putting some pressure on the top left, or the top right rather, and I'm also streaming some units to the top left. This is pretty key to do because it forces him to pull units back and makes sure so that like this kind of death push is actually a lot weaker, just because I have a handful of snakes putting damage up here and kind of forcing him, if he wants to commit to this fight, you know, it's gonna cost him workers on the other side of the map. He does a really nice job of dodging some fireballs here, but I still have a pretty solid surround, so I'm chunking down a lot of his archer counts. And even though these trades are looking pretty decent for him, you still have to remember how cheap my snakes are compared to his forces. So just keeping these trades pretty close is always going to be favorable for the beast player, because I can almost replace these units. I can pretty much replace them anytime I want, whereas for him it's pretty expensive to like replace these archer counts. Fortunately, he does catch my my mages out, which is pretty expensive loss for me. But I do trade out a couple archers in the process behind there. So again, you can just see the damage that my run-bys have been causing. I did a run-by up here, and even though I didn't do that much damage, I don't think I only killed the one tower, I am able to force him to pull his workers off the gold mine, which is just a massive amount of income, especially since he's really starved for money at this point. And I'm also picking off workers constantly. This is where I like to add a speed upgrade towards the later stage of the game. This really allows you to take these trades and harassment a lot more effectively if you get some of those speed upgrades, allowing your snakes to slither around the map really effectively. So we're both just kind of macroing up, looking at our wounds, getting our units together. Dragon Archer Z is pretty low on money. It's having a real hard trouble maxing out, whereas I have just plenty of cash and all my dens are just pumping away. One mistake I kind of made this game is I probably could have added a few more dens. I'm only at 6 here, and it's probably better to be 8, especially at this stage of the game. At least 8, maybe 8 or 9 even. So like a couple dens added on at my 5th base would be a good idea. Also, something I kind of wanted to touch on is the fact that it's a good idea to split your dens up so that way he can't camp your entire production line. Like, if he pushes his army in here and attacks this side of the map, I still have 4 dens I can rally over here to produce. If he, hits down here, I still have all of this dens to produce from. So it's a good idea to add a couple dens over on, like here, just so I can have further diversified production. So over here I'm just trading out more units. Unfortunately I wasn't watching and I lose a mage, but that's okay. The important thing is to really keep pressure on both sides of the map. And he just shouldn't have enough units to break these towers, especially with the amount of units I have here. He's now going to lose all these archers because I have a critical mass of snakes and wolves here. It's an important thing to note. When you're facing a Rax player and you see he has a pretty smallish army, if you have any opportunity to just completely jump and surround it, that gives you a really good advantage as the Beast player, because if a Beast player can win a decisive fight and wipe out archers, that is almost like a game-winning move there. Whereas if the Rax player wipes out your Beast army, it's actually not that big of a deal. You can replace a Beast army pretty easily and pretty swiftly. Whereas a Rax army takes a lot longer to produce and a lot harder to really get that number of units out. If that makes sense. I kind of spot this dropship and I'm like, whoa. So tempted to try to get a snipe with my snakes. But of course snakes do very little anti-air damage. They do some, but it's -6 versus flying, so it's not tons. Here I just sniped the castle and back up because I had that really great speed upgrade, which allows me to just kind of bounce around both sides of the map effectively. And Bastion is one of those maps where it's pretty wide side to side. Like the distance between his left base and his right base is quite far, and you can see he's really struggling to defend both sides. And this is really what you have to do as the Beast player, because otherwise you can lose just straight up fights to maxed out Rax forces. Because Rax armies are so strong in the bulk, so you don't want to just stake all your eggs, put all your eggs in one big engagement basket. You'd much rather do counterattacks on both sides of the map and just cut down their economy. Like you can see here, because of the harass I've done, he basically has to win with the amount of units he has right here. He has almost no money left. I don't know why he's not producing anymore, but he's basically lost the game at this point because of the harassment on either side of the map. And we really saw it throughout this entire game, all the way starting with the dragons, moving into the beast, snake, and wolf harassment and stuff. Just getting this, just cutting down the Rax economy to the point where they no longer can afford to produce army units. Now I'm just going to get some juicy fireballs to end this game, and really put the nail in the coffin of our red Rax player here. And we have the GG. Tense matchup there. We were able to pull out the game. Slightly unique build order there with the dragons. This is not completely standard Beast versus Rax, but later in the game we got towards really normal stuff that happens in every Beast versus Rax. So hopefully you guys could learn something, glean something from that replay. Hopefully you enjoyed it and had a good time hanging out and watching this game with me. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, more Littlewargame content is going to be coming at you. So keep an eye out for that, and I will catch you later.